We came out of the long dark on the far side of a dead star, and the first thing the Vael did was go quiet on every instrument we owned. I have stood on the bridge of the Lantern-Bearer for 11 years, and I have heard her in every mood a ship can have. I know the hum of her drives when they are happy and the cough they give when they are not. I know the chatter of the sensor decks, the way the watch passes word in low voices, the small machine sounds that fill a hull the way breathing fills a chest. When we crossed the threshold the wardens had drawn around that world, all of it thinned to nothing. Our scopes did not fail. They simply found a world that gave them nothing back. No return, no reflection. A planet the size of an old Earth, blue and brown and white-capped at the poles, hanging in front of a swollen amber sun, and on every band we could read it was as silent as a held breath. My name is Cal Donovan. I was a major then, and the contact detail aboard the Lantern was mine to lead, which is a polite way of saying I was the man whose job it was to walk out the door first if a door ever needed walking through. I had trained for 2 years for a meeting I did not believe would come. We all had. You drill for first contact the way you drill for fire at sea, seriously, completely, and with the private certainty that you will retire before it ever happens to you. It happened to us at the edge of the Vael. Captain Idris Mara had the con. She was a small woman with a flat, careful voice and gray coming into her temples, and she had taken us across more empty light years than any human had ever crossed before, all to deliver a cargo we had spent 4 years learning how to carry. She did not look at the world on the main screen. She looked at the space around it, which is the difference between a captain and a tourist. There, she said. The space around the Vael was not empty. It had only seemed empty because we had been looking for the world. Now the scopes began to read the things that ringed it, and the watch went very still, and somewhere behind me a young rating drew a breath I could hear. They were ships. They were ships the way mountains are rocks. The smallest of them ran longer than anything humanity had ever set in space, and there were not a few of them. There were thousands. They held station in shells around the planet, layer on layer, in formations so old and so exact that the gaps between them had the look of architecture. They did not move to meet us. They did not need to. They had been there a very long time, and we had walked into the middle of them, and the simple fact of their stillness said more than any maneuver could have. We were inside a hand that had not yet decided to close. "Are they powering up?" Mara asked. "No, ma'am." That was a Damie at sensors, and his voice had the careful evenness of a man who is making himself sound calm. "They're already powered. They have been the whole time. Captain, they're not running their drives. They're running, I don't have a word for it. Their hulls are warm and their weapons are cold, and they're just waiting, all of them, like they've been waiting. For us. For anybody." I had read the briefings. Everyone aboard had. But there is a distance between a briefing and a sky full of dreadnoughts that have been holding their breath for 10,000 years, and that distance is a thing you only cross once. Let me tell you what we knew, going in, because it matters to what came after. 4 years before that morning, a survey tug working the cold edge of our own space had found a derelict. It was a small ship by any standard, scarcely larger than a freight lighter, and it had been dead for a very long time. It was no design any human had ever drawn. The hull was grown, not built, a pale spiraled thing like the inside of a shell, ribbed and chambered, with no engines we could recognize and no weapons at all. It had drifted into our reach by accident, on a course that had carried it out of the dark for longer than our species had kept written records, and inside it we found the dead. There were 40 of them. They were not like us. They were tall and narrow and many-jointed, and they had been laid out with enormous care, each in a chamber of its own, wrapped in cloth that had not rotted, holding objects in their long hands that we did not understand and did not disturb. They had not died violently. The ship had simply failed somewhere in the deep, its grown systems giving out one organ at a time, and its people had lain down in order and waited for the cold. The last of them had sealed the others in before sealing itself. We could tell because the last chamber was closed from the inside. We did not know who they were. We did not know where they had been going. But the ship had kept a record of its course, not in any computer but cut into a long pale plate at its heart, a road of stars carved in a hand we slowly learned to read, and the road did not end where the ship had stopped. The road ended here, at the Vael. It took us 4 years to understand even a fraction of what that meant, and we are still only at the edge of it. But we understood this much. The 40 had been pilgrims. They had set out for a place that mattered to them more than their own lives, and they had died short of it in the dark, with their faces turned toward a star they never reached. And we who had found them had 2 choices. We could study them, or we could finish the road. There was a great deal of argument about this, back home. There always is. There were people of intelligence and goodwill who said it was madness to fly the only specimens we had ever recovered straight into the arms of a power we knew nothing about. There were others who said the dead were not specimens. In the end, the argument was settled the way the important ones usually are, not by the loud people, but by a quiet one, an old woman on the oversight board who had buried 3 husbands and a son, and who said, when her turn came, that there are some things you do not get to decide are convenient. You only get to decide whether you are the kind of people who do them. So we built the lantern bearers' hold to carry the dead, and we carried them, and we crossed the dark, and now we were here, ringed by the fleets of a people we had come to give something back to, and the only word any of them had spoken to us so far was silence. The hail, when it came, did not come as sound. It came across every system we had at once. Every screen on the bridge filled with the same shape, a figure, tall and narrow and many-jointed, standing very straight against a background of dark stone. It was alive. Whatever else it was unmistakably, terribly alive, and it was looking at us with eyes set in a long, pale face, and when it spoke, the words arrived already in our own tongue, flat and clear and without warmth. As though our language had been a thing it kept in a drawer, and took out only when it had to. You have entered the keeping of the first ground, it said. No vessel may approach the Vael. No claim upon it will be heard. Declare your claim and be destroyed, or withdraw and be permitted to live. There is no third answer. Choose. The bridge did not make a sound. I want to be honest about that moment, because the temptation when you tell these stories is to make yourself braver than you were. I was afraid. We all were. Not the bright, clean fear of a fight, which I had felt before and could manage, but a deeper and stranger thing. The fear of a man who has walked into a cathedral and found it full of weapons, and understood, too late, that he does not know the rules, and that the people who do know them have killed everyone who got the rules wrong. Mara did not look afraid. That is a captain's gift and a captain's burden. She straightened her jacket, which she did when she was buying herself a second, and she said in her flat, careful voice, "This is Captain Idris Mara of the human vessel Lantern Bearer. We make no claim upon your world. We have come to return something that belongs to you. We ask only the chance to do it." There was a pause. In the pause I watched the figure on the screen, and I saw it do nothing at all, no shift of weight, no flicker of expression, and I understood that the stillness was not absence. It was the way they listened. We move when we think. They go quiet. Their thinking is a kind of held breath. "Every vessel that comes here," the figure said at last, "comes to take. There is no other reason to come. You will tell me what you intend to take, or your words are a lie, and a lie before the first ground is itself a claim. Declare your claim." "We have no claim," Mara said again, and I heard the first thin thread of strain come into her voice, because she was a smart woman and she could hear that she was being offered a door with no room behind it. "We are not here to take. We are here to give. We have your dead aboard, Pilgrims. We found their ship adrift in our space, long dead, on a course for this world, and we have brought them the rest of the way." I will never forget what happened then, because for the length of one held breath, the entire armada flinched. It was not emotion. Nothing moved. But Adami made a small choked sound at his station, and when I looked at his screen I saw what he saw, the cold weapons of 10,000 ships going, all at once, in the same half-second from cold to hot. The whole sky around us lit up on the sensor board like a struck match, 10,000 killing engines waking together. And the figure on the screen, which had not moved at all, said in a voice that had changed, that had gone from flat to something I can only call hollow, the way a bell is hollow. "You will not speak of the unreturned." And then the channel closed, and the sky began to close with it. There is a thing that happens to good people when they are very frightened and very far from home, and it is not cowardice. It is the opposite. It is the sudden, overwhelming pull toward action, to do the thing you are good at, to reach for the response you have trained, because doing something feels like surviving and doing nothing feels like dying. Every man and woman on that bridge had spent their lives learning to fight a ship, and the ships around us had just bared their teeth. I felt the pull. I want that on the record, because it is the most human thing in this whole account, and because it is the thing we did not do. "Captain," said the weapons officer, a steady man named Holt, who I would have trusted with my life and frequently had, "their target locking, all of them. I can give you a firing solution on the nearest line. We won't win, but we'll—" He stopped because there was nowhere for that sentence to go. "We won't win." There is no rest of that sentence worth saying. Mara stood at the center of her bridge with her hands at her sides, and she looked at the closing sky, and she did the hardest thing I have ever watched a person do. She did nothing. "Weapons cold," she said, "all of them now." Holt stared at her. "Cold," she said again. "Power down the rails. Open the gun ports and point them at nothing. Show them empty hands, Mr. Holt. If we are going to die out here, we are not going to die having lifted a weapon at the people whose children we are carrying home." He held her eye for one more second. Then he said, "I, Captain, and the lantern-bearer, a warship, a thing built to fight, 60,000 tons of human iron with the teeth to bloody anything its size, opened her hands and offered them empty to a sky full of guns." I have thought a great deal in the years since about why that worked. I have heard 100 people explain it, and most of them get it wrong because they want it to be clever. They want there to have been a trick, some signal we sent, some leverage we held, some piece of knowing better that saved us. There was none. We did the unprofitable thing for the unprofitable reason, and we did it where it could be seen, and that, it turned out, was the whole of it. But I am ahead of myself. The sky did not fire. It held bared, hot, locked, and it held, and the holding stretched out past the point where any human nerve should have been able to bear it, and still no light crossed the dark between us and them. And in that unbearable stillness the channel opened again, and the figure was there again, straight and pale and terrible, and it said, "You carry the dead of the keeping." "We do," Mara said. "You will prove it. You will bring proof of what you carry to the threshold of hands, and you will come as the old law requires, one alone, unarmed, unarmored in the open, where the truth cannot hide behind a hull. If you carry the unreturned, you will be heard. If you have spoken a lie to buy your lives, the one who comes will not return, and then we will end you, and we will be slow." A pause. "These are the terms under which the keeping has heard a claimant for 10,000 years. There are no others. Send your one or withdraw and live." The channel did not close this time. It waited. Mara turned around. She looked at the bridge, at her people, every one of whom would have gone, I think, if she had asked. And then she looked at me, and I understood before she said it that the door I had trained 2 years to walk through had just opened, and that there was nothing on the far side of it that I could see. "Major Donovan," she said. "Captain." "It's your detail. I won't order this, I'll ask it." I thought about home. I will not pretend I didn't. I thought about a small house with a green door and a woman who had told me, the night before I shipped, that she would not say goodbye because goodbye was for people who weren't coming back. I thought about the long road of stars cut into a pale plate, and the 40 in our hold and the last chamber sealed from the inside. And I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that there was no decision to make. There was only the thing that had to be done, and the question of who would do it, and the answer to that was me. "I'll go," I said. It is a small thing to write. It was a small thing to say. The largeness was all in the doing. They sent a craft for me. It came off the nearest dreadnought like a chip off a cliff, a sliver of pale-grown hull no bigger than a launch, and it crossed the dark and mated with our airlock as gently as a hand cupping water. I went out to it the way I had been told, alone, unarmed, in a soft suit that would keep me alive and do nothing else, with no weapon and no armor and no transmitter, carrying in my 2 hands the only thing I was permitted to bring, a single beer from our hold, and the long pale plate of carved stars that had been the dead ship's heart. Mara walked me to the lock. She did not give a speech. She put her hand flat on my chest over the place where a heart is, and she held it there for a second, and she said, "Bring them home, Cal, that's the whole order, bring them home." Then she stepped back and let me go, and the lock cycled, and I went out of the world I knew into the body of a thing I did not. The inside of the Warden craft was not a room. It was a throat. The walls were the same pale-grown stuff as the hull, ribbed and faintly warm, and they breathed. I felt them move, slow and even, the way a sleeping animal's flank moves, and there were no controls and no crew, only a hollow shape to hold one passenger, and the long sealed quiet of a thing that knew exactly where it was going. I sat on the floor with the beer across my knees and the carved plate against my chest, and I held them both, and the craft swallowed me down toward the great ship at the center of the armada, and I prayed, which I had not done in 20 years, and was not ashamed of it. The flagship, when we reached it, was not a ship. I keep reaching for that word and it keeps failing. It was a structure the size of a small moon, and it was old in a way that human things are never permitted to get old, weathered and crusted and grown over with the slow architecture of 10,000 years, and at its heart was a chamber that opened to the stars. I do not know how the air stayed in it. I have stopped asking how their things work. The craft set me down on a floor of dark stone in the open mouth of that chamber, with the naked sky above me and the Vael, the first ground, blue and brown and silent, hanging directly overhead, close now, near enough to fill the dark, and I stood up on legs that did not entirely want to hold me with the dead in my arms, and I waited to be met. They came out of the stone. That is the only way I can describe it. The far wall of the chamber was not a wall but a gallery, tier on tier rising up into shadow, and as I watched, the shadow filled. They came in their hundreds, tall and narrow and pale, the many-jointed people of the silent world, and they did not come in ranks or files but in a slow settling, like dust coming to rest, until the whole vast tiered dark of that chamber was full of them, and every one of them was utterly still, and every one of them was looking at me. I had been afraid on the bridge. This was past fear. This was the thing fear protects you from feeling, the bare, undefended knowledge of how small you are, and how alone, and how very far from anything that loves you. I stood in the open mouth of a moon-sized ship, under a forbidden world, surrounded by an ocean of an ancient people who had killed everyone who ever stood where I was standing, and I held 2 dead strangers in my arms, and I had no weapon, and no armor, and no way home, and no idea on this earth or any other what I was supposed to do. So I did the only thing I knew. I knelt down, and I set the beer on the dark stone in front of me, very gently, the way you set down something that is sleeping, and I laid the carved plate of stars beside it, and then I stood back up and I let them see my empty hands. One figure came forward out of the gallery and descended to the floor. It was taller than the others and older. I could see age on it, a kind of translucence in the pale skin, a slowness in the joints, and when it spoke, I knew the voice. It was the one from the screen. "You are the one," it said. "I'm Major Cal Donovan," I said. My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. "Of the human vessel Lantern-bearer, I've come to return your dead." It did not look at me. It looked at the beer. It crossed the stone with a slow, gliding grace and lowered itself beside it, and it reached out one long hand and drew back the cloth, and it looked into the face of the thing inside, and it went very, very still. I have said that their stillness is the way they listen and the way they think. I learned in that chamber that it is also the way they grieve. The silence that came off that one figure, kneeling over the dead I had carried, was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It filled the chamber. It filled the dark. The hundreds in the gallery were silent too, but it was a different silence, a watching silence, and the difference between the two told me, more clearly than any words could have, that the thing kneeling beside me was not a warlord or a king. It was kin. It was somebody's family. "Where?" it said at last, and its voice had lost the flatness entirely now, and what was under the flatness was so raw that I had to look away from it. "Where did you find them?" I told it. I told it all of it, the survey tug, the drifting shell, the 40 laid out in order, the cloth that had not rotted, the objects in the long hands we had not disturbed, the last chamber sealed from the inside. I told it about the carved plate and the road of stars, and the 4 years we had spent learning to read a hand none of us had ever seen, and the longer road we had spent deciding what to do with what we had read. I did not make a sound noble. I told it about the argument, about the people who had wanted to keep the dead and study them, and about the old woman who had said that there are some things you do not get to decide are convenient. I told it that we had not known, until we crossed into their sky, what the world below us was. I told it that we still did not understand it, and that we did not need to, because you do not have to understand a man's grief to carry his dead home through it. The figure listened the way they listen, going stiller and stiller, until it was less a living thing than a held note. And when I was done, it picked up the carved plate of stars in both its long hands, and it read it. And a sound came out of it that I felt in my chest before I heard it, a low keening note that was answered, after a moment, by the whole gallery, hundreds of voices coming in under the one. A grief 10,000 years deep, finally given somewhere to go. When it stopped, the figure stood. It turned to me, and for the first time it looked at me, really looked, the long pale face and the dark eyes fixed on my small, soft, inadequate human one, and it said, "You do not know what you have done." "No," I admitted, "I don't think I do." "The unreturned," it said. "We have a word for them that does not carry into your tongue, but the nearest of your words is grief. 40 of our finest set out for the first ground in the age of my mother's mother's mother, and they never came, and we never knew. We do not lose our pilgrims. The whole of the keeping, this fleet, this watch, 10,000 years of it, exists so that no one ever again takes from us the right to die where our beginning is. And in all that time, the one wound we could not guard against was the one that took the unreturned. They did not die at an enemy's hand. They died of distance. They died of the dark, and we could not reach them because we do not leave the veil, and so we carried them as an open wound across 40 generations, never knowing whether they had been destroyed or enslaved, or are still out there somewhere, dying slowly, calling for a home that could not come. It looked down at the bier. And then a young species, a species so young your light has not yet reached our oldest neighbors, a species we had never heard named, comes out of the dark in a ship with teeth, into the heart of our power, and when we bear our guns at it, it opens its hands. And in the hold of that ship, behind those open hands, it has been carrying our dead. Carefully, for 4 years, not to ransom them, not to trade them, not even to be thanked. It has come 10,000 light years to lay another people's dead in a ground it has no share in, and when we threatened to burn it for the trespass, it did not lift a hand to save itself, because it would not raise a weapon over the bodies it was bringing home. The chamber was silent. "Do you know," it said, "what every other claimant has done in this place across 10,000 years? They have declared their claim. They have come to take the first ground because it is the most sacred thing there is, and the most sacred thing is the thing the powerful most desire to own. We have destroyed every one of them, and we were right to, and we grew hard doing it, and harder still, until the hardness was the only thing left, until we had forgotten that the Vael is not a fortress to be held but a grave to be honored, our grave, the first grave, the ground we all came up out of. We forgot. 10,000 years of standing guard over a holy thing, and we forgot it was holy. We only remembered it was ours. It knelt again and laid its long hand on the bier, gently, the way I had laid it down. You remembered for us, it said. You, who had no right to. You treated our holy ground as holy when we ourselves had let it become only a wall. You came to the most sacred place in the reach of the stars with the power to fight for it, and you wanted nothing from it but to give it back its dead. It was quiet for a moment. That is not a thing we knew a young species could do. It is, I think, not a thing we were still able to do ourselves. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, which I am told is the most respectful thing a man can do in that chamber, though I did it only because I had no words. You will not return alone, the figure said and stood. I thought for one cold instant that it meant to kill me after all. Then I saw that the craft that had brought me was opening, and that more of the warden vessels were drawing in toward the lantern, not to fire but to escort, and I understood. Bring them down, the warden said. All of them. Bring your ship to the first ground and your people and the Unreturned, and we will go down together, and we will lay our dead in the ground they died trying to reach, and your people will stand with us while we do it because you carried them, and because you would not put down your hands to do it, and because in 10,000 years you are the first to come to this place and leave it more sacred than you found it. It paused, and something moved in the long, pale face that I have never been certain was not the equivalent of a smile. No one not of the keeping has ever set foot on the first ground. You will be the first. That is the gift we have to give, and it is the only one large enough. We went down together. I will not try to describe the first ground in any detail, because I do not have the right and I do not have the words, and because some things are diminished by the telling. I will say only that it was a world like a world, with wind and water and the smell of living soil, and that there was a place on it, an old place, a worn place, a place with the look of something visited by an unimaginable number of feet across an unimaginable span of time, where the keeping lays its dead, and that we carried the 40 there, the wardens and the humans together, my people in their soft suits and the tall, pale mourners in their cloth, down a long slope under that amber sun. And we laid them in the ground they had died trying to reach. The warden who had met me stood beside me while it was done. When the last of the 40 was laid down, and the long, pale plate of stars set at their head, it turned to me, and it said a thing I have carried every day since. You will tell your people, it said, that the first ground is open to them, not to claim, never to claim, but to come as pilgrims come in the old way with open hands. You have earned what no power in 10,000 years has earned, and you earned it by not wanting it. We will not forget. The keeping does not forget. And when, in the long age to come, your young species stumbles, as the young do, as we did, there will be one ancient and patient people, far across the dark, who remember what you were on the day we first saw you. That is no small thing to have, Major Cal Donovan. There are empires that have lasted 1,000,000 years and have nothing like it. I have thought about that day for the rest of my life, and I expect I will think about it until I lie down in some ground of my own. People ask me when they learn I was there, what it was that humanity did right, as though there were a lesson in it, a tactic, a thing you could teach. There wasn't. We did not outthink them or outfight them or outmaneuver them. We could not have done any of those things, and we knew it, and we did the only thing that was left to us, which was the thing that was true. We had something that was not ours, and it belonged to someone, and we carried it home. That is all. That is the whole of it. We crossed an ocean of dark with another people's dead in our hold, and when the guns came up, we put our weapons down rather than raise them over the bodies we were bringing back. And a people 10,000 years old looked at us, a species so young our light has not reached their neighbors, and decided, on the strength of that one thing, that we could be trusted at the cradle of all living minds. The wardens still keep the first ground, they always will, but the watch is not what it was. It is no longer only a wall. And on a worn slope under an amber sun, among the graves of the first people, There are 40 markers in a hand that no human ever learned to write, and beside them, where the old warden insisted on setting it, a single human beer cloth, kept and tended by the keeping, in memory of the day the dark sent them not a conqueror, but a stranger with open hands, who had come a very long way to do the one decent thing, and would not be moved from it by all the guns in the sky.